In just 2 years, I went from having zero jazz skills to playing jazz piano professionally in both solo and ensemble settings. The only way this was even possible isn't because I'm some prodigy who was just ripping at age 7, because believe me, I'm a late learner. It's because through my own constant failure and frustration and relentless curiosity in figuring out this whole jazz thing, I eventually knew I had to come up with some sort of framework to make it all click. And when I did, it changed everything. And now I'm making this video to show you exactly how it works. And if you've been following me for a while, then you know that I do not bullshit when it comes to learning. I don't sell hacks and secrets that promise overnight results. Instead, I'm gonna show you real systems that actually work, and not just for me, but also for all the students I've worked with all over the world. When I started this journey, jazz seemed impossibly complex to learn. It was like you either knew it or you didn't. Through all the YouTubing and buying courses and books and ebooks, I thought I had to just memorize a bunch of scales, chords, modes, and drill exercises and all 12 keys every day and transcribe a bunch of solos that made no sense to me. But that just left me way overwhelmed. And the worst part is I had nothing to show for it. I still couldn't just play through a jazz standard or improvise a decent sounding solo. Eventually though, I realized I had it all wrong. You see, I was viewing jazz as some sort of complex math problem, but in reality, it's just a language. And with any language, you learn it from its smallest, simplest elements, You start with the letters, and then you learn to form words, and then sentences. And then one day, you're just speaking. You're just playing jazz. And this is exactly what my framework is built on. And I call it the Jazz Morphology Matrix. So what exactly is morphology? Morphology is the study of language, but specifically the study of the words within a language and how they're formed and how they're structured off of what we call morphemes. And morphemes are just the smallest units of meaning that make up these words. And so morphologists will study how these morphemes interact with each other and how meanings can be different depending on what comes after another morpheme, what comes before a morpheme, that kind of thing. And when it comes to jazz, it's no different. So what we need to do is we need to understand jazz down to its smallest units of meaning and how those units interact with each other. And I call this the stock vocabulary. So one of the misconceptions in learning jazz is that you sit there and you figure out your own vocabulary. But no, you learn the vocabulary that's already part of the language. So here's how I view all of this. I'm gonna break this down to 2 parts. So first, check out this chart, okay? It looks a little crazy, don't worry, it's not that bad. We're gonna go over the stock vocabulary, and then we're gonna go over ways to apply the vocabulary so that you can get playing, okay? So let's look here. I have the vocabulary broken down into 4 general categories: melody, rhythm, voicing, bass. We don't have time to go through everything in deep detail, obviously, okay? But we can look at some general ideas that will really be helpful for you. So in terms of melody, you just need to learn some cliches. And when I say cliche, I mean as simple as major scales and minor scales, and major triads and minor triads. You gotta know all those. And then we get to more jazz specific cliches. I'll show you what I mean later. Rhythm, what you really need to know are just some comping patterns, okay? And comping patterns are really just gonna be based off of having a strong swing rhythm, okay? That's really it for a while. You don't need to go look up complex jazz rhythms. Just really understand swing, and we'll talk about specific comping patterns. And so these are kind of like my morphemes, right? The further you go out from this graph, the smaller the units become. More specific, I should say. Now let's look at bass here. So bass, you can really just break this down into half note bass and quarter note bass or walking bass, okay? And then after that, it's gonna be voicing. This is the big one, because this is what separates jazz chords from other chords and other genres, is the way the notes are ordered. And that's the definition of voicing, right? How the notes are ordered. And so you have your one-handed voicings and your two-handed voicings. And you have these different types. And then as we expand away from the center here, we get smaller and smaller. So all these voicings, they're based off of knowing your shells, right? And shells are the essential tones, which are the 3rd and the 7th of each chord. So before you even go learning all these things, you really need to know the smallest units of voicing, which are the essential tones, third and seventh. Okay? And in a nutshell, that's about it. Okay? These are the things I focused on that got me from playing zero jazz to going pro in 2 years. Now, let's expand into some more details so you could get a clear image of all this, okay? So I got a bigger graph here. It's actually the same chart. It's the same exact chart, but with details, okay? Don't let it scare you. We'll break it down real quick here. So let's start with melody again. When it comes to cliches, like I said earlier, it's as simple as just learning your scales and your arpeggios, and then learning about chromaticism. This could be quite a big topic in itself, so we're not going to get too deep here, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people come to me and they're struggling with improvising, but they don't know their major scales that well, okay? Playing them up and down does not mean you know them. You got to know, like, what's the fourth of D? What's the flat six of G? What's the seventh of A flat? You got to know those things. These are like general music cliches. They're not even cliches in the definition of cliche, right? They're just so foundational. But I still think of them as like these foundational cliches as part of Western music, right? And then you get jazz specific. So for example, some jazz specific melodic cliches would be like this over C major. We hear this all the time. It's been done forever, And if you want to get specific to like bebop, this is a piece of bebop language. Or this. Or this. So these are just like some enclosures, right? But again, these are stock pieces of vocabulary that you learn and you memorize, and then you start learning how to string them together, okay? And this will also help you when you listen and when you analyze. So it's not just melody in the terms of you playing melody and making melodies, but it's also when you listen to melodies and analyze melodies. And then when it comes to rhythm, these three comping patterns will take you a long way, okay? The reverse Charleston, the Charleston, and the red Garland rhythm. Are there more? Of course, but they're all kind of based off of these three. And when it comes to bass, you have these very stock ways of doing your half note bass and your walking bass. So for half note bass, you would use like roots, fifths, and chromatic approaches. So for example, if I'm doing Fly Me to the Moon, so I'm just doing the root notes in the fifth. So for A minor, the root in the fifth, then D minor, the root in the fifth. And then you can add chromatic approaches. So instead of using the fifth, I could approach D minor like this. Chromatic step below the D or above. All right, either way. And then walking bass, since we have more notes per chord now, we can play more things. So we could do like triads or just straight scalar motions. So from A minor to D minor, I could do something like this. And that's stock. I didn't make up that line, right? I just did it again for D minor to G. You could also do like these triads. So I did a triad, A minor triad, followed by a chromatic step to the D, right? I did it again there. D minor triad, chromatic step to G. And these are all very stock, okay? Stock vocabulary. I'm not making these things up as I go. They're kind of downloaded into me, and I learned them from the history of jazz and all the players who did all these things. And finally, the big one, voicing. So real quick here. Rooted voicings, those are voicings that have the roots in them. Okay, you know those. And then bass shells. So bass shells is when you play a shell. So like the essential tones of C major, right? Third and seventh, and then you add a bass note. There you go. It's a 3-note bass shell. I didn't make up this voicing. It already exists in the jazz vocabulary. Same with this one. If you can reach it, great. And then you have 2-note bass shells. So I could play C major 7th like this. I don't need the 3rd. Or I could even do it like this. Just root and 3rd. So 2-note bass shells are just the bass note and one of the essential tones. And these are also known as Bud Powell voicings. You might have heard that before. Rootless voicings. Oh, this is a big one. So many students have come to me with a big question mark over their heads when it comes to rootless voicings. They're sitting there trying to figure these things out. Oh my goodness. Rootless voicings are so finite. There's only a few of them that you learn, and you memorize them. You don't sit there trying to figure out rootless voicings. Like D minor 7th, boom, just do that every single time and you'll be fine. And then you have, so this is the type A because the 3rd's on the bottom. Type B is the inversion with the 7th in the bottom. It's the same 4 notes. But this is all you would ever really need. And after that, you have maybe spicier options, but that doesn't matter, okay? This is what's important. Learn it, memorize it, and get moving. Play a bunch of jazz standards. Open voicings. This is a little bit more advanced. You have your 4-note, 5-note, 6-note. So for example, like you could play D minor like this. And this is if you're comping and you're playing in a band and someone's already playing bass. You know, this is a stock 4-note open voicing for D minor. 5-note, you could add the root note here. And a 6-note, you would add an 11 up here. And this is stock. This is not my voicing, all right? Block chords, also a little bit more advanced, right? But this is like the George Shearing and Barry Harris type stuff. That's where you can have something like this, like C6, right? You see the octave on the outside. And then you could also learn the drop 2s, where you drop the 2nd note from the top down an octave. There's a C6. C major 7th, you do this. Again, stock vocabulary. It's like looking in a dictionary and just learning some words. These are words that exist in the jazz dictionary, okay? And then spread voicings, finally, my favorite. The reason why spread voicings is highlighted is because it's such a crucial element of playing solo jazz piano. You absolutely need it. And spread voicings are a type of open voicing, but they're melody driven, meaning they depend on the melody note. So if I'm playing Fly Me to the Moon, let's just keep using that example. I'm voicing these chords based off of what the melody note is, okay? And I'm using what I call the functional level voicings right now. So the melody note will really tell us how to arrange the rest of the notes in the voicing so that they sound good and also idiomatic to jazz. I have these 3 levels here, and this is unique to my personal system in approaching spread voicings and how I learned it and how I went pro in just 2 years, landing 3-hour-long solo piano gigs, okay? And I cover these in detail in Novu Jazz Academy, which is my online jazz academy, which features several courses, especially courses in spread voicings. The functional level would just be, you know, just the bare minimum. The notes that you would need to play the chord, which are really just the 4 notes of the 7th chord, right? So A minor 7th, this is like functional level with the 3rd and the melody. And then authentic would be, you know, you're gonna find these more specific to jazz. So for example, if I take B flat 7 and the melody note is, let's say, the root note, a functional level voicing might be something like this. This is not specific to jazz. You could do this really in any genre. Okay, and it only has the 4 notes of the 7th chord, right? The roots, the 3rd, the 5th, the flat 7. But you're not really gonna see this in jazz. But I think you need to learn it this way, so you could just plug it into a bunch of jazz standards. Then a more authentic way to play a B flat 7 with a root note in the melody might be this. All right? So we have B flat 13, or you could do this. All right, or you could even use the 5th here instead of the 13. It's not as interesting. The 5th is thought of to be the most boring note, okay, in dominant chords. This here. And then at the pro level, that's where you start considering altered extensions, like, okay, listen to how rich that is. But here's the thing, this is a stock voicing. I didn't make this voicing. All the greats have played this. Anyone who's playing jazz at a professional level, they know this voicing and it's ready to go in their fingers whenever they want to use it. And there's many of these pro level authentic voicings. You could also do this one here. This is like B flat altered. You could do it this way. You can move the 3rd to the left hand. You could even just do like this augmented 7. So just a flat 13. This is a little cleaner, right? A little simpler. But again, all these are stock voicings, right? And so when you learn them in order, you don't get overwhelmed. The idea is that you play a bunch of standards. You learn like 10, 20, 30, 40, and you're just moving along and you upgrade gradually. Now, this is the first part, okay? I wanted to show you what the stock vocabulary looks like, but now I want to show you something else that's equally as important or maybe even more important. It's what I call the stock styles. How do you apply all the stock vocabulary? Well, you need to learn your standards in these 4 stock styles, okay? And this is going to take you so far. For example, let's start on the left. For every standard you play, you need to know how to play just the melody and just the bass. Let's do Fly Me to the Moon. And you do this at whatever level is appropriate for you, okay? And that's something you kind of have to figure out by yourself or with the help of someone else. And so if you're especially advanced, you might do more of a walking bass. If you're just starting, you might just do whole note bass. I think you get the idea. And then you need to be able to do melody while the left hand is just comping. So that might sound something like. Okay, and then right hand comping and left hand bass. And you do this at whatever level you're at. And then finally, spread voicings. And if you're more advanced, you might, incorporate some more extensions in your chords, and some reharms. So, depending on your level. But these 4 styles, I think, were the biggest factor in getting me to where I am. It's just taking them, applying them to all the standards. And doing it in time. Don't forget to get that metronome going or iReal Pro or some sort of backing track, okay? Do all this in time. And then there's these advanced styles. And, it's going to be a while until you touch these. You spend so much time on just these 4 more accessible styles. So 2-handed comping, you're playing a lot of 6-note, 5-note, 4-note voicings. Let's just do like a 2-5-1, 2-5-1, the key of C. This is your D minor, and then your your G7 might be something like this, Right? And then your C major you might do, and then your block chord melody. So if I'm doing Fly Me to the Moon, and then 3-part bossa. I'm not sure if that's the best name for this, but it kind of describes it, That's where I'm playing 3 parts, the melody, the bass, and then the inside chords. Something like that over Fly Me to the Moon. But that's really it in a nutshell. And so approaching jazz from this kind of perspective completely transformed my playing. So get out there and start practicing with this mindset of accumulating stock vocabulary. The vocab that's already there in the jazz language for us. We don't need to figure it out. We just got to learn it, memorize it, apply it to a bunch of standards, and you will reach your goals and you will be able to play the way that you've always wanted to. And if you really like this video, then make sure to follow my page here on my Instagram, my TikTok, and you'll be seeing more content like this.